Ted O'Brien is the Shadow Minister for Energy and Climate Change. He joins me now. Ted O'Brien, welcome back to 7:30.
Thanks very much, Sarah.
Now, you say you're going to build 7 nuclear reactors. You've announced the locations, but you have no idea how much it's going to cost and very little idea, it seems, of the timetable for their construction. Is that correct?
Sarah, we've had a very big day today, and I think a very exciting day, because under Peter Dutton's leadership, we've announced part of our plan which will ensure that Australians can have cheaper, cleaner and consistent 24/7 power. We believe in a balanced energy mix, and that includes zero emissions nuclear energy, working together with renewables and gas. Today we decided that we would announce one part of that policy, and that is the locations of our power plants.
So you know the cost, but you're just not saying, is that right?
When it comes to the costs and when it comes to the economics and so forth, that'll be all released in due course.
Well, let me ask you this, because in April, Peter Dutton said that Rolls-Royce could build, he claimed, a small modular reactor for between $3.5 and $5 billion. He had those figures then, so why aren't you using those figures today?
I believe they were figures provided by Rolls-Royce, and if I'm not mistaken, they're in the public domain.
Yes, but they were quoted by Peter Dutton. Why not use those figures again today?
That's fine, but we have announced a policy which is not specific to any one technology provider. As much as you're right to point to Rolls-Royce, the role they will be playing with our nuclear-propelled submarines and so forth. But what we've said today is we won't, as politicians, be making the call on which technology we like best. But you do have, you're right to point, you know, Rolls-Royce are looking at small modular reactors, Hitachi, Westinghouse.
So we're clear
that's not what we plan to be announcing today at all about technology.
Let's talk about some of those issues, because there is no policy without them. You're not going to talk about the money.
Well, can I disagree with that? Because actually there is. We've already put out a lot of the policy today. A part of that policy says politicians should not make the call on what technology it is unless there's a technology assessment done.
Yes.
And that should be done by an independent authority, and that will be our Nuclear Energy Coordinating Authority.
Let's talk about that today. You are the minister. So let's talk about small modular reactors, because you did say that small modular reactors would form part of this policy.
They're an option.
So how many Rolls-Royce small modular reactors are there in operation in the world?
So Rolls-Royce are advancing very quickly. I believe they may or may not.
May I come back to the question?
They may or may not be down-selected by the British government as part of their plan.
Yes, so right now, how many Rolls-Royce small modular reactors are there in operation in the world? Answer?
If you're talking about the small modular reactors in submarines, for example, I can't give you a number, many.
No, as small modular reactors.
But in terms of the SMRs to which Peter Dutton referred previously and Rolls-Royce speak about publicly, that is under development.
So the answer to that is none. All right. Are there any commercial small modular reactors in operation in the world?
Yes, there are.
Where?
There are in China.
Sorry, commercially, not in a command.
Well, unless the reports out of China are incorrect. But yes. But the point is, we won't be for a moment thinking about making an order if it be small modular reactors today.
But I suppose the question is, as of yet, there is no demonstration that small modular reactors actually work in a commercial setting.
Well, there are. I just gave that answer to you.
Outside of China, and to be clear, that's not the same kind of small modular reactor you're talking about. That's essentially the model from the submarine moved to operating outside of the water. So, but coming back to my basic question, right now we're agreeing that there are no small modular reactors operating commercially in the world as we speak.
I've already answered that question. I pointed to China. You seem to disagree, and that's your right to disagree. I'll make this point. If you look at the province of Ontario in Canada.
Now, I think you raised that. I'm going to stop you.
I would like to finish the point, if you allow me to, because I've started it. They have already made an order for one small modular reactor. It's actually the GE Hitachi BWRX 300. They have since quadrupled that order. I've been to the site where they're doing the site preparation. Now, if you are suggesting that in fact GE Hitachi isn't actually developing that after all. Ontario didn't actually make the decision, or that it's not happening.
I think I was very
That's
clear in
okay.
my question. I asked you whether any of these reactors were operating anywhere in the world outside of a command economy like China.
By the time Australia would be looking at introducing zero emissions nuclear energy into Australia, all of the reports suggest that the reactors, which we've already spoken about, will absolutely be commercial and operating. And also I point out that the modern, larger plants are also part of our plan.
Let's talk about those, because actually Peter Dutton today referenced Westinghouse large-scale reactors as a preferred option. Now,
no, he didn't. He used it as an example, not as a preferred.
Well,
as an example, he referred to the APR 1400s, which is a South Korean model,
and
also
Westinghouse
Westinghouse AP 1000.
Yes, indeed.
As an example, not a preference.
Yes, but he's the leader of the opposition. He obviously referenced it with meaning and knowing what he was doing.
As an example,
let me go to the question. This is a company that went bankrupt in 2017 precisely because of massive cost overruns building nuclear plants. Doesn't this history give you cause for concern?
We've done our research on these very issues, and if you apply that same logic, then you would say, well, Siemens are probably the biggest producers of wind blades for wind farms. Now, Siemens sought around about a €16 billion bailout from their government. So should we therefore say, you know what, because of that experience, let's not think about wind?
But very precisely, Westinghouse, let me quote Reuters at you.
Go ahead.
Westinghouse miscalculated the time it would take and the possible pitfalls in rolling out its AP 1000 nuclear plants. This led to $13 billion in cost overruns. I'll just come back to that same question. Have you done your due diligence on this plan?
Yes, we have. And so if you apply that logic, as I said, due to Siemens, well, you wouldn't do wind. Let's have a look at Snowy 2.0. That has over doubled in its cost over the last 2 years since Labor came to office. Because of that, should we now say no to hydro? If you look at Sun Cable, Sun Cable, the original proposal, was going to be the largest solar project in Australia. That ran into financial trouble. So should we therefore rule out solar? If we're going to play the game of let's point to a particular project and say, well, that didn't go well, the problem is you're not left with any technology.
Except that, of course, what we understand from the reports from the CSIRO, from the international energy agencies, that these cost overruns are not just restricted to Westinghouse and problems that Rolls-Royce indeed have had, but they bedevil the whole industry.
The international agencies, in fact, point to the need for nuclear in the mix. They point to the effective rollout in different countries. Have there been technologies, whether it be hydro, nuclear, wind, solar, you name it, that have had trouble? Of course.
You just referenced international agencies. Let me quote one of them to you. The head of the International Energy Agency, an organisation committed to expanded nuclear energy where appropriate. He said this: Australia should not pursue nuclear energy. It should focus on its advantages in renewable energy. Why not listen to the International Energy Agency on nuclear?
Well, there's no doubt that we should be focusing on our comparative advantages, which is why, as part of a balanced energy mix, one, we should be leveraging our ability when it comes to renewables. We've got a track record on that. We should continue. We have abundant gas under the ground in Australia. Now, my political opponents want to keep it in the ground. They don't want it in the mix.
Let's stick to nuclear. It's a complex topic, and we've got a little bit to cover.
It's a complex topic.
I think you didn't really answer my question on the UN agency, so let's move on.
Unpack it. Complex, therefore unpack it. And therefore, we need, as we go forward, do we need renewables in the grid? Yes, we do.
That wasn't what they said. They said Australia should not pursue nuclear energy.
Do we need gas in the grid? Yes, we do.
Let me put the question to you. Let me put the question to you in a different way.
System, I believe we need zero emissions nuclear energy.
If you're so convinced that these projects are economically viable, why not allow them to be built and run by commercial businesses rather than put huge amounts of taxpayers' money at risk?
Well, again, if you look at the rest of the world, it is common practice for governments to play a critical role, a big role, in the financing of these
You're
projects.
not talking about a critical role, you're talking about funding all of it.
Well, let's look at Western Europe, France.
Why don't we look at Australia? Because
if you allow me to finish
Yep.
my explanation, Sarah.
Yes.
If you look at Western Europe, look at France. There you see government owned. Let's look in our own region. Let's look at South Korea, government owned. Before I just referenced Canada, Ontario, government owned. So this is common practice. Secondly, to get to your point about what about Australia, look at Snowy 2.0. Hydro
let's just stay with today's issue.
And gas. Well, you said Australia, so Snowy 2.0, hydro, gas. This is government
a very
owned.
small amount of time. We don't want to waste it all on Snowy 2.0. Let me ask you a question about renewables and how these two policies fit together. So which of the government's large-scale renewable programs are you planning to cancel?
So we've made it very clear that, yes, renewables will be part of the grid, but because you bring in that 24/7 baseload power of nuclear energy, it is inevitable that you will need fewer large-scale industrial wind farms and solar farms. As a result too, Sarah, we will not need up to 28,000 kilometres of transmission lines, which Labor has earmarked.
I think the number is 10,000. But this takes us to the crucial question of time.
It actually
I'm just going to insist on this question.
You did say it's not 28. In fact, Labor trumpets the idea of becoming a superpower, hydrogen exporting superpower.
I just want to stay, if we can, I'd like to stay with the nuclear policy because that's what you've come in to talk about. Now, your
question was on renewables, can I just say?
Yes, as part of the energy
Go
mix.
ahead.
Now, you're doing this because you're promising lower electricity costs, but the CSIRO says, and this is the crucial question about time, says the earliest we could see a nuclear reactor with the extensive high level of regulation and permitting in place is 2040. What happens to electricity prices in the meantime?
So we are yet to roll out the rest of our energy policy. But in the short term, one, we don't believe in the premature closure of baseload power stations. Number two, we believe that renewables should continue to be rolled out. And number three, we need gas and a lot more of it.